What's up, guys? Here we are with Engineered Muscle Podcast number 3. Today we'll be talking about the number of reps you should be doing depending on your goals. And we'll be diving more into that. What's the difference between 1 to 3 reps, 5 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 20. So we'll be diving into that deeper. And as always, the goal of our podcast is to keep it very focused and give you guys as much value and as much practical knowledge as possible. The last thing we want is for you guys to walk away with all this scientific information and not do shit with it. What do you have to say to that, Madison?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, like you just said, our goal is always that you guys are able to walk away and, apply at least something. And I think it's good to learn the science as well, or at least have an understanding. But again, the engineered part, right, is that you're able to apply it. And, starting to like have those concepts run in your mind is very useful, and it starts triggering your own creativity of, how you can apply it and stuff. So I think it's always good to hear that stuff, but it's also, that's why we really like to be able to give you some of the distilled, actionable notes of how we've applied it, how we've applied it with our clients, and applied it for ourselves. So you can try those out and then also try some of your own applications as well.
100%. But yeah, man, so let's start with beginners. So people who are just getting started in, bodybuilding. Yeah, we're talking about mostly bodybuilding here. A lot of our listeners are people who just want to gain strength and add more muscle. So for those guys, what rep ranges would be sufficient to get them started? So I'll just add one thing before I let you give your take on it, is that you start, like, when you Google that question, you get a lot of different articles, different answers. And one of the most common one that people love doing is 5x5.
Yeah.
Or starting with, and I think like in high school football coaching category, a lot of high school football players love that 5x5. And and then like you look at, people like Mark Rippetoe from Starting Strength, to all those books and all that literature. And you realize like those guys give you like, hey, add strength. But the problem being that, I mean, I love Mark Rippetoe, but I feel like his athletes don't have the physiques that a lot of our champions want. They're not those sculpted, narrow, broad shoulders and narrow waist type of bodies. Like most of those guys are lifting for strength, not muscle size. So I've gone back and forth on it. So let's go ahead and get started with you on beginners who want to start gaining some muscle, because strength, people say they want strength, but at the end of the day, everybody wants to gain muscle. So let's start with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. And I think for beginners, it's a tricky line with beginners, because in general, I would say beginners need to focus on getting more muscle, regardless, anyways. Because usually, if you're a beginner, you really don't have much muscle. But at the same token, a lot of beginners don't really have that much strength either, and they do go hand in hand, even though they're different entities, like we kind of talked about in some past podcasts. They are also related. But for beginners, I think for the most part, the two medium ranges for reps are probably going to be, where you should spend most of your time. That said, I think for everybody, you should spend time in kind of all the ranges, because they all offer unique benefits. So, like, if I just really briefly outline them, like 1 to 4 reps roughly is really going to give you a lot of strength benefits and very little muscle building benefits, because the volume is very low with that. And typically when you do lower reps, you're going to do a lot higher sets and you're able to do a higher weight, but because you're doing more sets, you're getting more practice of the movement. So it's a really good way to get proficiency at the movement. So this can be useful for beginners. If you're not a good squatter, if you're not a good bencher, or whatever it is that you're not good at, you might benefit at doing, rather than doing 3 sets of 8, it's only giving you 3 sets of practice versus doing 8 sets of 3, same exact number of reps, but you got 8 versus 3 times practice. So for improving your skill quality, lower reps are very, very good. That said, those are not going to yield huge muscle gains. They will help your strength. They will help your technique. Then looking at like the 4 to 8 rep range, this is kind of the lower end of the hypertrophy. This is like heavy hypertrophy work. This is high muscular tension. That's like we talked about in podcast number 2. So that's this is like a mechanical tension kind of range. This is going to yield some pretty good muscle building and some strength benefits as well.
But I just wanna look shredded and have abs and just look like the model. So what the hell should I fucking start with? Because my high school coach said 5x5 is what I should do. And yeah, actually, you know what? That's because I feel like a lot of our audience might just because they might just want to know what is it about how can they optimize the living hell out of 5x5? Because I feel like you can if you're smart about it. So let's just tell them all right, don't fuck, because what happens with a lot of beginners that I work with is when you tell them progressive overload, what they start thinking is that they need to progressively overload the number of exercises they're doing. And constant manipulation of reps and sets makes them forget their actual numbers. So I always tell my clients to push themselves a little. Guys, you always have 2 more reps in you. And and then I also emphasize safety over injury, always be safe.
Yeah.
But my point being, a lot of beginners, they start benching 135, and when they get to 135, they're mentally safe at that range, so they never push themselves because their freaking coach, who's probably a beginner, I hate talking smack, but their freaking coach who's a beginner, 1 week is having them do 5x5, and next week he's having them do 4 sets of 12. So these beginners have no real understanding of how to manipulate the actual weight because the reps are changing every week. So they have no benchmark to go off of. Whereas if you just do 5x5, then you're okay, last week I did this. So linear progression becomes easier in a sense where you're okay, the reps are the same, the sets are the same. Now I can manipulate the weight, right? What are your thoughts on that?
That's the most basic progression scheme for a linear periodization, right? You have whatever rep and set scheme, and then you just progressively add weight. And it should be small and incremental. So even if you could go up 10 pounds, you probably should just go up 5 pounds, typically, because it's going to leave more room for growth in the future. But for a beginner, while changing the reps and sets every week is probably too much for that beginner. You can get away with it if it's the same movement. For beginners, shouldn't change their movements around. They should get good at the movements. Changing the reps and sets of a movement can help them get better at that movement because it lets you experience it in a slightly different way. That said, for a beginner, variation should be controlled and should be on the lower end. I don't want to say minimized because it doesn't necessarily need to be minimized, but it needs to be definitely less. A beginner doesn't need the variation that an intermediate or an advanced person does. They need to learn and getting good at whatever they're doing. So to that end, something that people do good with the 5x5 is what you were saying, is that it's kind of consistent week to week, and it gives them benchmarks. But if they're going to do something with variation, if they're keeping a log and they know, okay, well, last time I did four sets of 12, to use your other number, this is what I did. They should know that number. So they need to write that down if they're going to be following a program of that sort. Personally, I'm not a big fan of 5x5 because I would rather do 4 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 4. I think 5x5 is just too much. By the time you get to that last set, you're a little too drained to focus and do them well. I don't think one of the reasons 5x5 is chosen, it's kind of a mix between hypertrophy and strength, but I don't think it optimizes either. I think a beginner could get more benefit by doing more sets, less reps.
You just triggered every high school football coach in the country.
Damn straight. If you want your athletes to succeed and do better, you need to look at what they need, and not everybody should be doing 5x5.
No.
Some guys are going to need more muscle. Some guys are going to need more strength. Some guys are going to need more explosiveness, especially if you're talking about athletes. So those guys should be doing more sets, lower reps, right, and working on technique and explosive, not necessarily always heavy. That's more of a – this is getting kind of out of the topic, but that's more 60 to max 70%.
Yeah.
But that's more of an explosiveness thing. Again, that's kind of outside of what we're talking about today. But,
yeah. So guys, like for a lot of you beginners out there who are, just getting started, getting ready to, getting into the weight room and just starting to notice some gains. The biggest advice we have for you is get good at the movements. Like I'm going to give you some real practical advice that I give all my clients. So let's say you don't have a personal trainer, like not like somebody who's with you at all times. What I would recommend is like when you are deadlifting, squatting, or benching, record yourself.
That is wonderful, wonderful advice.
Right? So like with all my clients now, like we have a Facebook Messenger group, and they just send me that, and everybody chips in. And when you have before I even get to it, some of my clients have already given them the little cues and this and that. And what that does is everybody's learning, but also you're able to correct things faster. And when you correct things faster, you're able to make more progress along the road. The last thing you want, guys, is to be that lifter who's 5 years into training and can't even squat properly. What's funny, Madison, I travel a lot. So I go to different gyms all the time. And every gym you go to, there's some because I go in the evenings, that's when all the OGs are there, right? All the big guys with beards. And I remember there was this one time in Tennessee or Arkansas, somewhere in there. And I walk into the gym and I had my hoodie on and I load up the bar on squatting and I squatted. And dude, the guy came up to me and he's like, son, that was hell of a good form. And the reason I share that is because those people can help you guys. So if you're a complete beginner, find that one or two or three people that are really good in the gym, those power lifters, those old school guys, and have them hey sir, I used to do this all the time. I remember when I used to train in the garage gym and back in Michigan, I would have when I was squatting, I would have somebody who's really experienced. I'll be like, hey sir, can you watch my squat form and give me any pointers? And people, first of all, people love that because you're putting them in an authority figure and they feel important. But second, they can give you pointers right then and there, which makes your subconscious brain start thinking about them, and next time you improve. And a lot of this, and even I'll add one more thing. When we get our personal training licenses or certifications, people think that once you shake your hand and you get that certificate, you know everything. Guys, me and Madison learned this over a lot of years, and a lot of it was constant critiquing and getting better. Constant feedback loop coming in from different people. And now I'm at a point where if somebody corrects me, I know enough to, if I think the advice is wrong, I can correct them and be like, hey, yeah, that's the reason, right? There are some people who were the other day, no, this was 2 years ago. This one time I'm sumo deadlifting at my university gym, and these two guys, they were like, yeah, man, that looked good, but you ever tried pulling your legs in? I was like, yeah, that's called conventional, bro. This is sumo deadlift. And they were like, oh. I was like, yeah, here, look it up, Google it. And then they were like, oh, I never even seen it. So there's some advice you have to take, with
a grain of salt.
But yeah. I want to
you should take that and to be fair, you should have a critical mind and a critical thought process, so that even when me and Mo tell you something and we're experienced and we know what the fuck we're talking about, we think we know what the fuck we're talking about. I believe that. But even when we say something, you take it with a grain of salt and think about it and think, does that make sense? And if you're critical like that about when you hear something from everybody, whether it's the biggest dude in the gym or someone small, everybody has something to teach you, even if it's what not to do. There's always a lesson to be learned. And if you have that mindset, you can extract information from all over the place.
And 100%. And I think like, this is part of the reason I'm like going away from the reps and the numbers, because I think this shit is more important. And the reason I say that is because last night I was talking to one of my clients who's a beginner, and we were dissecting his deadlift, right? And we're going through it and watching the videos, because he rarely records himself. So I made him record himself on 3 different sets. And bro, this is the shit that you don't see if you don't record yourself. So he posted the video of him, deadlifting 125, 135. And everybody in the group is like, that's some really good form. And me being experienced and having been through it, I was like, your lats aren't tight enough. Like, I'm not feeling the tightness. Just because, and a lot of the time when people are trying to correct their form, or trying to see their form, they go with a lighter weight. When you go with a lighter weight, almost every time you're going to get it right with perfect form. It's when like you're pushing the weight, when you're at 80, 90%, 1 rep max, that's when the form comes in. And then I had him, I was like, bro, jump the numbers up. Let's see what happens when you go to 185 and 225. When he got to 225, his hips almost every time would shoot up. And those are the things, guys. And I want you to be careful like with that, because what happens is, and we're not going to dive into squatting or any of that, but I'm just giving you an example. Like, if you were worried about reps and sets, but your form is iffy, guys, the priorities are messed up. Let's get the form right, because the last thing you want is be injured and be in a hospital for 6 weeks. Like, that'll mess you up.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add on to that like, your technique is never perfect. You look at the people who are squatting thousands of pounds, guys that are, all the top lifters, and you ask them, was that rep perfect? And they're like, no, I need to do this better. And when I lift, it's still the same thing. Like, sometimes from the outside, even when I will still videotape myself, particularly if I'm strength training, and I'll review the thing, and I'm like, oh, I fucked up there. I fucked up there. I fucked up. Even while I'm doing it, I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. And then the next set, I'm trying to do it better. And it'll never be perfect. You will always fuck it up. But that margin of how much fuck it up gets smaller and smaller the better you get. But it's still not perfect. There's still points to work on. And as Mo was saying, as you get stronger and you can do more, there's a greater challenge to your technique. And the challenge becomes to maintain that technique. And when I was training my deadlift, I would record every single set, warming up on every damn set, and I would watch every time and then try to take a note out of it and try to fix it. And that's why my technique got very good. And like the point that Mo was making, that we're making right now, versus the reps and the sets, which are important, but the quality of the movement is more important. So if your goal is strength, it should be moving the weight very well and smoothly. And if your goal is muscle building, it should be how that motion feels on your muscle, the stretch, the contraction, the tension, the actual muscle that you're trying to work doing the work. Because also, if you're trying to build muscle, some of those guys just throw around a lot of weight, but they don't end up being that big. Meanwhile, there's a guy doing half the amount of weight that's twice their size. Why is that? Because they're putting the tension where they want it. So it's important to know what your goal is and to do it well. And when you're doing it well, then the reps and the sets can become very important.
No, 100%. And in this scenario, like quality and quantity, like they both matter, but quality helps a lot more, especially for beginners, because the better quality you have with each rep, you're setting yourself up for success, versus like doing like lots of reps. See, it's just that, like, actually what's funny is that strength training is one of the safest sports out there in the numbers of the statistics we have on injuries. Like, you play soccer, like ACL injuries, knee injuries, I mean, like, all kinds of injuries, and every sport has that. Whereas strength training, once learned well, you're good. And guys, the funny thing is, let's say like you're a complete beginner and you don't know what to do with, like, should you be worried about every single equipment and the form with that? No, guys, like for me, it was just literally fixing the big three, and everything else just fell into its place. Like, because if you can like fix your compound, squat, bench, and deads, like everything else kind of feels like you start getting intuitive. You're like, okay, I'm doing cable push downs for triceps. Is my tricep working? Yeah, it is. And like you start like adjusting biomechanics, and you're like, maybe my elbows should be tucked in more to feel this movement more. And when you start thinking critically about it, you are the technician of your own body at that point. And when you get to that level of like practice and knowledge, I think that's when you're at a point where you're like, you can, like, I meet some lifters, man, like in person, and I can tell if they're legit or not. It's so funny. Like somebody who actually has real hardcore experience versus somebody who just claims it, right? Like, and you see that a lot with really like pro level trainers, like next level. And some of them, they have different, skills, but they are very well marketed, so their marketing is on point and everybody calls them the best of the best. But I meet them and I'm like, you're missing some real fundamentals here, versus other people that I meet, and I'm like, I just shaking hands and just like meeting that person, you're like, fuck, like I just feel like I'm surrounded by real knowledge here. And that's the ability of, being at a point. This is throughout any field. Like, we're both engineers, we've been in the tech, like in any industry, you should get to a point, you should know enough about a topic that you can really identify the experts. And because like when you're a beginner, everybody looks like an expert, but that's not always the case, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
But
when you don't know, it's really, when you don't know much, it's really easy to get sucked into bad information too. But
yeah.
as long as you start having that critical mindset, and then once you start figuring out who a couple true experts are, he kind of gives you, it gives you a true north that you can gauge other information off of. Because there's also sometimes there are things that are kind of conflicting, but both actually true, and there's some non-intuitive things in this field, and there's sometimes things that contradict but can also both be true. It's and that comes more to the like optimization type of thing. Well, how can this be the best if this is the best? Well, they are both good, but they're good in different ways, and that's more of the minutia. But at least if you start finding some of those those north stars, those true north points, you can navigate yourself a lot better.
No, 100%. And like the last thing I would say to that would be that um, it's like realizing, like having a clear goal. Like as a beginner, guys, no matter how much you know, you probably won't have a very clear goal, and that's okay. Like people keep asking you, what are your goals and what are your goals? And I remember like it used to piss me the fuck off, and I just wanted to lose like 10 pounds of fat. And every buddy of mine from high school who has competed or was like getting lean, I would ask them, hey man, like I love your transformation. I need, like, how can I get there too or something? And their first fucking question was, what are my goals? And as a beginner, I didn't know the fucking answer to that. Like, what the fuck am I, like, is it 10, like losing 10 pounds of fat? Like, I don't know. Because if I say that, then he's going to say, no, that's not your goal. And it's just that, that's why,
That can still be your goal. But
right?
I know what you're talking about now.
Like, it's like a lot of beginners are scared to even share their goals because it's intimidating to ask somebody who's like 3 steps ahead of them and relate. Like, I make fun of like all these like, high ticket fitness coaches these days who just love, like, it's so funny. Last night I was listening to Mark Ripito, and Ripito was saying how therapists are trying to become coaches and coaches are trying to become therapists. And it's like so fucking fascinating if you look at it, because you go to a coach to lose a few pounds or gain some muscle. And actually what Ripito was really saying was, this one trainer that he didn't mention, but these guys like have the whole therapeutic side of deadlifting figured out. So they if somebody walks into them and that person is not able to deadlift yet, they won't have you practice deadlifting. They will actually fix your fucking ankle mobility for 6 weeks, and they'll fix your knee mobility for another 6 weeks. So they have these like 5-step programs that put people through this, because they literally believe that not everybody is created the same way biomechanically, so the rules don't apply to everybody. And that is a very slippery slope, because for 99% of you listening right now, the rules apply to you. Neutral spine applies to you. Pushing and pulling the bar a certain way applies to you, because we're all humans, guys. At the end of the day, like, the fancier these guys make it, the more they can charge you. And when you fall into that, you end up not growing at all, and you end up fucking spending 6 weeks fixing your ankle mobility. And how much ankle mobility do you actually need in a deadlift? Very minimal. So it's like, I don't know.
Not in a deadlift. In a squat maybe, but not in a deadlift.
Right? It just rattles me. It just rattles.
The mechanics, everybody, as a human being, we have all there are underlying mechanics. We all have the same skeletal system, muscular system, nervous system. What varies is kind of how they are put together. That is different from person to person. They can have an effect. That has effects in bodybuilding, has effects in powerlifting. It has effects in some minutia of details. And as you get more intermediate and more advanced, you will learn those things about yourself and learn, I'm better off doing this with this slight tweak. But the basics, the underlying things, if you do these, that's why when I teach the big lifts, I have a very particular way that I teach them. I teach them from this principle-based system, because if you do these principles, your body will just do the right thing, because we are programmed evolutionarily from hundreds of thousands of years to move, right? And it's already programmed into us. We just kind of never learn it in our modern society, because we don't move the way we used to. So, but if you can tap into those fundamental things, if you learn how to use your core correctly, how to use your lats, how to use your hips, how to connect with the ground, how to use your feet, and how to just put the system if you line up all the pieces, it just works. Like when I teach the squat, when I teach the bench, when I teach the deadlift, I don't teach you how to squat, how to deadlift, how to bench. I teach you how to set them up. Then you just do it, and it just comes out perfect every time. Once you set those, you just set it up. You set the system up, and you set it up for success, and it just happens, right? And a lot of people focus, well, when you're squatting, you need to do this part at this time. If you set up right, you'll do it right.
100%. And now, like, I think that was like such a well off tangent that we went on, because I feel like a lot of people need to hear it, because it's important, guys. Like, if you're ever in a program that doesn't feel like you're getting results, then it's time to make some changes. Because a lot of the time when you hire trainers, maybe he has a nice physique, maybe he looks this way or she looks that way. But like, if he or she's having you spend, waste time on bullshit, then intuitively you will know. Like, versus somebody who actually like teaches you. I remember, bro, like I still remember the day that deadlift started to make sense for me. Because before,
I have the same thing for squats.
Right? Like that one day so what happened with me, and a lot of people don't understand how easier but how complicated these movements can be. So like, if you give a normal walking person who has never been to the gym, if you tell them to squat a weight, they will squat it with their lower back, using mostly their lower back. It's just the way that people who don't know any better end up doing. And I remember no matter what I did, my lower back was almost always involved, and then I'll be so fucking sore. So then I was like, I'm not going to deadlift for a month. I did not deadlift for 1 month. And I remember just learning, like really just in my head, like even at night practicing, like how will I execute this movement? And I remember in that time period, I even wasted my money on chiropractors because I thought that was going to help. I mean, it did help a little, but nothing that I couldn't help myself. But like, and after that, I went back to the gym. Because I felt as a bodybuilder, I felt very embarrassed that I cannot execute a deadlift. This was 3 years ago in college. And I remember I had buddies who just gave up on deadlift. They're like, yeah, I don't even deadlift. but I wanted to master it because I knew it was a fundamental movement. I go to the gym, I pick up a bar, I take my shoes off. So I had a running shoes that I used to wear, and they were part of the problem because I couldn't feel my feet. So I took my shoes off, regular, just socks on, and I still have that recording. The first time I started feeling my hamstrings working was that day. And that was like an aha moment. And then guys, it took me another year to realize the lat engagement, to really fix the lats and really like get stronger as a whole on my deadlift. And it's like you go through these stages and that is completely fine. But the more you record yourself, the more aware you are, the sooner you'll figure out the mistakes, and that's less likely you are to suffer from back pain and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
All right, now let's finish this off with the reps and sets that you were referring to, just so everybody who's still listening.
Back on topic. just a half-hour tangent.
All right, so just moving forward from 5x5s to 4x8s, for example.
Yeah, so then like 4 to 8 range is kind of the lower end of it's like the heavy hypertrophy range. I hate saying like hypertrophy range because all the rep ranges will build muscle, all the rep ranges will build strength. But they kind of work in a little bit different ways, and some of that kind of feeds back into you go watch podcast number 2. But so anyway, so that's kind of those, and each of these rep ranges, right? So the higher your reps are, the less sets typically you're going to do, and likewise, the lower your rep number, the more sets you're going to do. And more sets means more practice. So for learning the movements, which is why I think like doubles and triples can be very useful for beginners, not because they're going to build muscle, not even because you're really going to use them to build strength, but just because they give you more time to practice the movement. So in that regard, they're very useful for beginners in getting those movements down. And once you start getting good at them, then you can start pushing the reps up higher, cut your sets back, and start getting some volume and getting some work out of them. But if you're not ready, don't have a good quality of movement yet, you're not going to be able to start working them hard. So then like the 8 to 12 range is kind of like the middle hypertrophy range. It's kind of more medium weight. You start getting more of more blood flow, more pump starts happening here. And then 12 to 20 is also is like the higher range. And this is a lot of blood flow, a lot of pump. Like I said in episode 2, shoulders are I really love lateral raises for at least 20, but I do upwards of 50 plus reps. Legs also.
Yeah.
What?
So I've also noticed that my shoulders respond really well to high reps.
Yep.
Whereas on compounds, I feel much better with lower reps.
Yes. Well, yeah, compounds are a bitch with high reps, but not that they're still beneficial, and they're really challenging. Like squats for 20s are a absolute. Those will slap mass on you. Those will shred fat off you. Those will get.
That's the shit that makes you want to puke sometimes. Like sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like those are the workouts that actually get you there. I've had that multiple times where I went to the bathroom like ready to throw up, and then I actually haven't thrown up yet, but it has happened, or I got really nauseous.
I've never thrown up from a workout, but I've definitely gotten some nausea bursts, and usually only on quad stuff is the only thing that like brings me there. But like I will be able to make it to a bathroom after a set of 20. I'll back off the set. I'll be like, you okay for like 3 seconds, and it just kind of whoop hits you. You're like, oh. There was actually, this is the first time this ever actually happened to me. This is like 2-3 weeks ago. I forget how many reps I was doing, but I was squatting hard, and I took my last set like real hard. I have to go check what day it was and to remember exactly what the hell it was, but this is the first time I ever experienced what I'm about to describe. After I put the bar down, it was just like, you know, kind of like in TVs and movies, they'll like a bomb will go off, and then they just kind of put that, and all the sound fades and everything starts blurring. I swear to God, that was happening to me. Like I could see about 5 feet ahead of me, and then everything past that was like super blurred out. I was just like, super like disoriented. All the sound went way down. I couldn't hear anything, and I was my heart rate was like through the roof, and my legs were just swelling up. But it was a real hard set. I never had anything like that. It took me a couple minutes to kind of come down from there. But that was an interesting experience.
That's great, man. Yeah, guys. So that was a really good podcast. This is going to be one of the short ones, but I really liked like the things we really helped you guys prioritize. Like, so guys, if you're a complete beginner, I would say focus on the form more than anything else. Like that should be your priority, really fixing it really. And then like make like Madison said, increase the weight by 2.5 to 5 pounds every set. Get better. Record yourself if that helps you. And because I know it will.
Write it down too. Write down whatever your records are. And especially as a beginner, you really shouldn't be going to failure, but you should know what your personal best at whatever that rep range.
Like I was just looking at my workout journal now. It's like a notebook. It's not this, but it's like a one of those notebooks that we used in college. I forgot their name, but very commonly used. And I've had my every workout recorded since it was June of 2015, and it's on there. And when you look back at numbers, like you can see trends. And now I use another app that lets me do a lot of that. But guys, recording everything, especially the weight that you're lifting, that's what will assure progressive overload. Because other than like the alternative is you go to the gym and you're like, all right, I'm deadlifting today. Yeah, let's just load up 225, right? Like you're just guessing your way through it. And whenever you guess your way through it, you're not going to make the maximal gain. So be strategic, make the most out of your time, be efficient with it. And I think you're destined for greatness. Cool. Anything else you would like to add to concluding remarks?
Yeah, I mean, like I hit a PR almost every time I go into the gym. And I mean, part of that's because I'm like how I rotate things around, and it's less linear. I don't use typical linear periodization, but I'm essentially hitting a PR every time I go in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even training for strength right now. But I think that's part of the intention that you're talking about. And then I'm not just winging it. I know what I've done, and so I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing 8s today. This is my last. This is my previous PR on 8s. I'm gonna beat this, even if it's by 5 pounds. And I think because you need to be, and the only way increasing weight is not the only way to progress. Something has to always get better, whether that's how much weight you're doing, how many reps you're doing, how many sets you're doing, the quality of which you're doing it at a better, higher quality, you're getting a better contraction, you have more tension through it. So something always has to be getting better for you to get it better.
100%.
That's the name of the game.
Love it. All right, guys. Catch you guys on the next one. We'll be posting this. You guys will hear it very soon. And please drop comments on any feedback you guys have or any questions that you would like us to answer, because we're always looking for topics for our upcoming podcasts.
Future topics that you want to
hear. You can email us at engineeredmuscle1@gmail.com. This is engineeredmuscle1@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram. DM us. Let us know what you guys think. We're always trying to improve this podcast. We're doing this for you. A lot of the stuff that we talk about, we already know. And we just want to give it back to all of you and to not fall for it, because there's so much bullshit in fitness right now that we genuinely feel obliged to do this. And we want to give you the straight up information from a scientist's point of view, from a trainer's point of view, and from somebody who actually has lived this lifestyle for a good amount of time. So hope this guy helped you guys, and look forward to having you guys listen to our next podcast, which is going to be way better, if not same volume as this. Peace out.
Peace.